Good afternoon. This is Kenny Storm with Fransisco Pizarro. I am in Cajamarca, Peru in 1533. This is after the time of the conquest of Peru. So, Fransisco Pizarro, what made you want to visit the Western Hemisphere?
Good afternoon. After seeing other explorers explore the New World, I became fascinated with finding new places which will give Spain more power and to make Christianity expand. I wanted the Spanish culture and the Word of God to travel throughout the world.
How was your first time in the New World?
Shortly after the news of exploration came out, I was in Seville. In 1509 I did Spanish missions and expeditions in the New World. In 1510 I went to Hispaniola to Europe under Alonso de Ojeda. I was in charge on the unsettlement of San Sebastian. In my second expedition to the New World I conquered Panama.
Wow, you are a conquering machine. How was your life before exploration?
I was born in Trujillo, Extremadura, Spain. My parents never married. I spent most of my life with my grandparents. My father was the Royal Infantry Captain of Spain. I was poorly cared for and I was poorly educated. I spent most of my early life pig herding. I am illiterate.
That's sad. Why did you go to Peru?
Since Hernán Cortés was able to conquer the Aztec Empire, I believed Peru had more wealth and would make me rich and famous. If I stayed in Panama, I wouldn't become as rich and famous as I am. I am skilled in warfare and exploration. I decided to ignore the fact that I was in my mid-50s at the time of the conquest. Peru was like a Roman Empire of the Andes Mountains. The disease of smallpox started in Mexico and now was heading south to Peru, and already Incas were dying from the disease prior to the conquest. Smallpox already killed the Sapa Inca and his eldest son, brought a civil war over who would succeed him. The civil war was going on when we entered the empire, which made them more vulnerable.
How did you pick your soldiers who were going on the journey to Peru?
I handpicked my army, who were mostly from the same few villages in Spain, which is forceful men, and 3 of the soldiers were my half-brothers.
If all armies were handpicked, there would be more success. What kind of weapons did your soldiers carry?
My soldiers carried swords and lances and were protected by light armor made of steel. My soldiers were a highly mobile force. Horses were also a weapon, since the Incas never saw them before.
What is the religion of you and your men?
We are devout Catholics and staunch Royalists. All our missions were in the name of God and the King of Spain. The rest of the world most have been converted to Catholicism in our conquest.
How did you travel to the Inca Empire?
We traveled on great iron ships which carried iron slings which spat out fire.
Wow. The conquistadors were even deadly while traveling. What did you see first when you entered the Inca Empire?
We went through the outskirts of the empire, which were full of ruins. When going through the empire, I was amazed on how the Incas laid out towns, out villages in a geometric grid pattern. The whole empire was networked with irrigation canals. I often wondered how a group of people could create such organized and structured empire with no awareness of the rest of the world. All the land was cultivated on, even if the land was not fertile. The Incas would find crops which would do well on the places which were not fertile. When we arrived in the Inca Empire, the civil war was won by Atahualpa, the 30-year-old son of the dead emperor.
What amazed you the most about the Inca Empire?
I was shocked when I saw the roads that the natives built for communication. The natives had no horses, wheels or writing. I would always see the runners or the chusquis carrying messages on the roads. The chusquis would be able to send a message to the whole empire in 1 week time. The runners would carry quippus, which were strings that had a message. Even though the Incas did not have a written language, they still had a method of communication.
That's astonishing. How was Atahualpa?
Atahualpa was small and strongly built. His armies were in charge of Jeju and Cuzco, and he was in control of Cajamarca. Atahualpa united Andean tribes under his rule. I learned Atahualpa lived outside of Cajamarca with 50,000 of his men. I told an Inca to tell Atahualpa that I will be his friend and his brother. On November the 15th, 1532, we reached the town of Cajamarca.
What happened in Cajamarca?
We were in fear and confusion when we saw such an organized civilization. We saw Atahualpa's 50,000 men, but we were not scared. They had no swords, no carve. They underestimated our power, which was a fatal mistake. Atahualpa gave us their customary drink in a gold cup, but we threw them to the ground, which seemed to have angered Atahualpa. Atahualpa gave us quarters in barracks which lined town square. We came up with a plan to capture the Sapa Inca. The huge barracks which lined the quarters, which has many doors, were a perfect ambush.
How did you capture Atahualpa?
Our plan was that all our men on a signal would charge out on our horses. I would remain with 20-foot soldiers and a few horses. We would charge out with Atahualpa. Atahualpa did not want to visit us. He was celebrating his winning of the Civil War. I was getting increasingly desperate. I told Msazanga to tell Atahualpa that I did not care how I would meet him, but I would treat him like a friend and a brother. Atahualpa wanted to show off to us. He decides to come in the square with his 5,000 men. Atahualpa had someone spying on us. That person told him we were hiding in our quarters full of fear. Some of us Spaniards were ourselves full of fear. A Dominican friar Vincent de Valverde left our quarters and went to the square with his Inca interpreter. The friar told the Incas to respect and worship the Holy Trinity, Spanish King and the Pope. If the Incas did not convert to Catholicism, we would start war and subject them to the obedience of the Church and His Majesty. The deaths of the war would be their fault. The friar gives Atahualpa a Bible, and Atahualpa is curious why it does not speak to him. When Atahualpa throws the Bible down, the friar tells us to start war. We killed all the men in the square but 200 with horses, swords or guns. Atahualpa's life was spared. We took Atahualpa to a cell.
Harsh. What did you do when Atahualpa was captured?
We bound with a chain for the whole night. Atahualpa gave us a huge ransom to set him free. The Incas brought us gold and silver. The gold and silver was melted and turned into 2 ingots. We did not get complete control of the empire. Atahualpa tried to run the empire in his cell. We were able to run freely throughout the empire without a threat. We destroyed all of the Incas' food storing banks. In Jojua and Cuzco, Atahualpa had loyal armies, but since the civil war was just over, they did not trust him and thought of us as their allies. In Jojua, Atahualpa's general still had a large army, but I invited him. The general gave us silver shoes. He did not suspect anything of us. The general fell under our trap. We had another ruler. Atahualpa was still ruling from his cell and hoped we would set him free when we had our ransom. 6 tons of gold and 12 tons of silver was melted down and shared amongst us according to our rank. There was no sign that Atahualpa was going to be released. More conquistadors have arrived from Spain. The newcomers were not a part of the deal on the gold they would receive. If Atahualpa was dead, a new deal could go in place. We made up another story that Atahualpa had a hidden army in the hills that would attack us and rescue him. I was nervous that my men would bow down to pressure. I tried Atahualpa for treason. He was sentenced to death by burning. For the Incas, burning was like killing the soul. We gave him a choice. If he wanted to die of grooting, he would be forced to convert to Catholicism. On July the 26th, 1533, Atahualpa died in the center of Cajamarca. Despite his conversion to Christianity, we burned his dead body.
Thoughts cruel. What happened to the Incas after Atahualpa's death?
I get that a lot. The Incas just melted away in the hills or died of smallpox, or we killed them. The Incas were lost without an emperor.
What did the conquistadors do after Atahualpa's death?
We moved south to Cuzco and we were welcomed because the Incas of Cuzco did not like Atahualpa, so we were liked. Several foolish tribes tried to make us leave their territory but never succeeded. We conquered the whole empire.
What were some short-term effects of your conquest?
We got fame and fortune for our capture of Atahualpa. Spain has become rich with silver and gold. Spain has become more powerful with more areas of conquest. We destroyed many areas which ended some natural resources.
What were some long-term effects of your conquest?
The Spanish were able to rule more land, which gave us wealth. We were able to bring back crops that the Incas cultivated. The Spanish language is being spoken in Peru and throughout the Inca Empire. Catholicism is now a main religion in Peru now. Many Spaniards want to live in Peru, and many Incas and Spaniards are having babies to give us mestizo people or people of mixed backgrounds. I think the conquest was a complete success, and I am proud I was in charge of the conquest. The conquistadors introduced domesticated animals, new diseases, and new government.
Thank you for the interview.
It was my pleasure.